Hi there, I'm Vicki. Welcome to my channel, Aussie Stampers. Today I'm going to show you this hand-painted watercolour effect using some Stampin' Up watercolour paper. And the stamp set is called Beautiful Day. And I'm going to show you how you can use a different sort of ink and use the fact that the ink will bleed a little bit. I'm going to use Tuxedo Memento instead of StazOn ink. Now normally I would use StazOn because I don't want the ink to smear, but I'm going to show you a technique that gives lights, shadows and darks and gives the effect of your piece being hand painted rather than stamped. So it gives a lovely fuzzy outline, a fuzzy edge to your stamp and keeps the middle colours really vibrant and bright. So I'm using a stamp positioner because I wanted to make sure it was well stamped. Now I'm bringing in my card base, which is some very vanilla cardstock, and I'm just going to drop that stamp right where I think it should go because it's already got so much ink on it. I didn't want to waste the ink. And I'm just going to give it another ink and yet another one because I want this to be something I'm going to lay my watercoloured piece over the top of. So I really want the body and the antennae on this butterfly to be really crisp and bright. Now I'm bringing in the watercolour piece that I've stamped and a nice watercolour brush, and I've chosen some markers just in colours that I like, and I'm going to start using this technique of drawing a line with the marker and just adding water to that part of the butterfly. Now this stops the whole thing from turning into a black and muddy mess because that will happen if you're using Tuxedo ink on this watercolour paper and not taking extra care. But it does allow for this lovely technique, this very artsy technique of making it look as though the edges have blurred into the coloured areas without muddying the colour. So I'm putting the markers on dry, then adding a tiny little bit of water with my paintbrush. And I'm going to leave a section of each of these segments of the butterfly with a middle section with a piece of lighter colour. You can see how I've just outlined the edges and I'm dragging that into the centre. Now what that is going to do is provide some light source to our butterfly. So there's going to be light shining on certain parts of the wings in the centres of these segments, and then the other parts are going to be quite vibrant and dark. I'm just bringing in a colour that is not exactly the same into the segment next to it. So just separate the segments out so that your blue and the yellow and the pink and the green and the orange all have their own space in these segments. You can see how I'm just doing the edges. And then a tiny, tiny bit of water. You don't want to add too much water. You can see I'm wiping it off on the glass there. And I'm using a tissue to blot rather than a paper towel. I want that tissue to grab the water really quickly. Now what this is doing, it's giving me the effect of light on my butterfly wings. So the centre of the butterfly wings are catching the light and it's a really pretty effect. Really, really pretty. Now I'm staying away from the black lines. I'm using my coloured markers over the black lines, but the water is only being touched to the inside areas, and this stops it from getting too blurry or too muddy with the black outline. And as I said, I would normally use StazOn ink, but this is a different technique you can use with something like Memento ink because it's going to allow for a little bit of blurring of the outline edges. Now I'm going to bring in some yellow as well because I kind of run out of colours that were not next to each other. So I thought, oh, I need an extra colour. So I just brought in a nice bright yellow and I think it really works. I think it looks great. And again, I'm just drawing on the outside of those segments. And because the butterfly is reasonably symmetrical, it's easy to figure out where to put each colour. And just a tiny dab of water and then quickly blot it with tissue. So I used just a tiny amount of water. You can see the water hasn't changed colour at all. You can see it's just enough water to move a little bit of colour into those centre sections of the segments where I've left a light colour. And wiping it off on the edge of the glass each time so you don't end up with a big pool of water. Now what I plan on doing with this butterfly is actually cutting the 2 wings off. So I don't need to worry about the body or the antennae of the butterfly because I've already stamped this onto my card base, and I'm going to cut the wings off and attach them so that they look very dimensional. And I'll show you a special trick for creating a really curved dimension on your butterfly wings when you go to adhere this to the card base. So now I'm just going to very carefully go in around the black areas. Now take your time with this, be very gentle, don't add too much water. You can see I'm not re-wetting my brush at all, I'm just using what's left on the brush. And what this does, it helps give a nice defined line, because when you stamp this on watercolour paper, especially the Stampin' Up watercolour paper, you get a lot of misses on the outline. It just misses in various spots. Now I'm going to blot it all quickly, just with one final blot, and that takes up any of the extra. But look at that, isn't that great? It's kind of blurred the outline in with the images. Now here's the card base. I'm going to stamp the sentiment on the inside, and the sentiment I'm going to stamp is "Happy birthday, may your day be as beautiful as you." So that's the sentiment with the Beautiful Day stamp set. And you can see I'm going to make sure it's lined up by lining it up on those squares on the top hinged piece of my stamp positioner. So I know that will stamp nice and straight. And bringing in the same Tuxedo Memento Ink here and getting a nice crisp stamp with that. And that looks beautiful, it reads really clearly. Okay, now we have the card base, now it's time to cut out the 2 wings. So you can fussy cut these, and it's a pretty simple cut too because it's an easy shape to cut. So I'm just using my paper snips, coming in while it's nice and dry, and cutting out those 2 shapes. And I probably could have used a smaller scrap of watercolour paper to stamp this on to begin with. Now here's the magic. So you can see it's going to line up over the top, and that looks nice as it is. You could adhere it like this, but I wanted to add some special dimension to it so that it looked really different. So I'm going to take some dimensionals and my bone folder and just fold the inner edge of the butterfly just where it touches the body, just on one side, and do that on both wings, just on that side that touches the body. And you can see that's giving it really gorgeous dimension. It looks like the butterfly is flying. Now, a couple of dimensionals is all you need. One on the back, on the top wing, one on the back, on the bottom wing. Nothing in the center, because you've already curved it inwards. You don't need to glue it. You don't need to add anything else to it at this point other than just 2 dimensionals. So that dimensional foam just gives it a little bit of lift, literally. And you can see how well the colours have stayed vivid with a little bit of black blending in, just to make them look as though this butterfly's been hand drawn rather than stamped. I love it. I love how it turned out. There's the dimension. I'll just show you on the side there. You can see how it is dimensional, and the centre is touching the body, which is what I wanted. Pretty cool. I was happy with how that turned out. So that's how you can do some stamping with some Tuxedo Memento ink and be very careful about your colouring. Then have the ink blur out to make a hand coloured finish. I just love it. So if you haven't given it a try, there's an idea for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.